Welcome back to the Radio Academy podcast. I'm your host, Georgy Jamieson, and this week on the podcast is Summaya Mughal from BBC Radio Leicester. 2 years ago, Summaya couldn't swim, but now she's helped her BBC Nations and local radio colleagues complete the 1,000-mile swimming challenge for BBC Children in Need. Not only that, but she presented her daytime show from inside a swimming pool. I started by asking Summaya to tell me what the 1,000-mile challenge is.
It was quite a feat, is what it was, Georgie. Thank you so much for having me. So the challenge was to try and get a load of radio teams from across the UK to collectively swim 1,000 miles over 5 days. So when you do the math, each team had to swim 24 miles over 5 days. And they could do that in different ways. They could have one person do it. They could have 5 people do it. And at BBC Radio Leicester, we broke it down to 5 team members. So myself, AD, Kevin, Adam and Helen, we all swam 62 lengths, which is about a mile every single day for 5 days. And that made up our 24 that went into that collective 1,000.
I mean, that is quite a lot, but it's particularly a lot for you because 2 years ago, you couldn't even swim, could you? You've been on quite a journey with this swimming lark.
Yes, and that's exactly what it is, Georgie. It's swimming lark that's taken over my life. But
Swimming
nobody wants
lark.
to know about anything else in my life. They just get me in when it's something to do with swimming. You know what I mean? But you know what? I'm owning it, and it's exactly that. It's absolutely nuts. It's taken over my life. It's changed my life, though, in the most positive, brilliant way. So you're right. I couldn't swim 2 years ago. I did a podcast all about it called Brown Gal Can't Swim. I was the brown gal that couldn't swim. Rebecca Adlington set me the challenge of learning in 8 weeks and then doing a 500-meter open water challenge. And there was so much that went into that 8 weeks because there was the physical challenge of learning how to breathe in the water and being calm in the water, but so much of a mental challenge as well of being an adult and admitting that you don't have a skill that kids have and the anxieties that come with deep water that I still feel now. So it really has been a whole journey. But I tell you what's been brilliant, Georgie. It's been connecting with other adults through this 1,000-mile challenge across the BBC stations who also can't swim. I was just, for example, recording a voice note for a presenter in Gloucestershire to say a massive well done, the breakfast presenter there. He's not the strongest swimmer in the world. And so just to be asked, could you send a voice note of encouragement and share your swimming tips and your swimming journey with this bloke? Because, he also can't swim. And that's been really, really brilliant, as well as, of course, raising over £100,000 for BBC Children in Need.
I was going to ask you, did you all manage the challenge? And do you know how much you've raised? So that's an incredible amount of money. I guess you did all do it then.
Yes, we all did it. I've been told we all completed it and we raised over 100 grand in 5 days, which is just phenomenal. When you do the math, that averages as £100 for every mile. So every time I went in and the team went in and swam those 62 or 64 lengths and did a mile, that essentially averages out as £100, which makes it feel so much better when you think about the challenge of getting in the pool and actually doing that swim, because it was super hard. But to know that it's all contributed to a brilliant cause and we've raised so much money is just fantastic.
So you swam 5 miles in that week over the course of the 5 days. And like we said, 2 years ago, you couldn't swim. You've had this award-winning podcast, which has started your swimming journey. When you discovered that the challenge for BBC local radio stations for Children in Need this year was around swimming, how did you feel?
I literally went to my editor and said, I want to be a part of this. And the reason I also mentioned it to her was because I was about to head to Paris to go and cover the Olympic Games for the BBC. So I knew that the swimming challenge was going to be happening, but I would be at the Olympics and then I'd come back and it would be sort of happening straight away. So for me, I was sort of like, this is right up my street. We've got a multi-award-winning podcast called Brown Girl Can't Swim. You would be nuts not to include me as part of the swimming team. I know I'm going to the Olympics and I know you're going to be concerned about whether I can do the Olympic Games and then go into a mammoth swimming challenge, but please, please, please sign me up. And the other thing, I suppose, was I just had massive respect for Laurie Dyche. So the idea came from her. She is a producer at BBC Radio Nottingham. And I think just the ambition of a producer to decide we're going to get over 40 radio teams from all different parts of the country to try and swim 1,000 miles in 5 days, all the logistics that goes into that, honestly, like, it's no mean feat. So I think there was excitement on a personal level, but just sheer respect to another producer who had come up with this absolutely nuts idea. And the fact she's pulled it off is just fantastic. So props to Laurie.
Now, another fairly nuts idea is not only were you doing this, you were all doing this, were you one of this big team doing it, but you decided to actually do your show from inside the pool. Now, I worked for many years for BBC Local Radio, and I cannot imagine the compliance forms you had to fill in, because water and electrics don't mix.
No, they don't. But you know what? I don't think, and I would love to know if anyone listening to this in radio world is aware, but I would love to know if this has ever been done before, because I couldn't find a radio show that had come from inside a pool. There's been plenty of poolside shows, of course, but inside the water was a completely different feat. And yes, we did have to take a lot of things into account, electricity included, but I have a fabulous engineer. The way that sort of happened was the swimming times that we had available in Leicester. So we decided to swim at a different pool every single day to get around the patch. And on 3 of the days, the swimming times on the Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday clashed with my show. So I present daytimes 10 till 2 on Radio Leicester. And so my producer said, well, you're either going to have to swim by yourself without the rest of the team there after your show or before your show, or how about on one of the days you do an OB and we just swim and present at the same time? What could possibly go wrong? So yeah, props to producer Andrew Fuster. It was his idea. I then pitted in and said, I think we should have an inflatable. That did not get past compliance and was not on the risk assessment. So we weren't allowed to do it with an inflatable. However, I did manage to do it, and it took 3 hours and it was exhausting. However, we were live from inside the swimming pool on day 2 of the challenge.
The 1,000-mile challenge for BBC Children in Need. 3, 2, 1, go, go, go!
Feels good. I've done 16 lengths already. It was a bit anxiety-inducing at the beginning because we're all setting off and there's loads of excitement. But the band, oh my gosh, we had the best soundtrack. And I tell you what, that we could hear it in the water, which was just fantastic. Playing that fantastic music. None of us have hit each other yet. Helen accidentally elbowed me in the eye. But other than that, we're going. I'm feeling tired, but I've got Michael Gunn in here. He's helping me out with my technique. My elbow is a little bit low, so he's sort of saying hi elbow. And I've even got my mum, and my mum has not swum with me since I learned to swim. So it's been 2 years since she's been here watching me swimming, which is a massive, massive deal. And she's going to get in the pool, and she herself hasn't swum in 2 years either. So, yeah, it's really special.
Your producer came up with this idea. Just talk me through some of the conversations and logistics that you had to overcome to present a 4-hour show from water.
Well, the first thing was the microphone. How are we actually going to be able to get on air? How are you going to hear what's going on? And also taking into account the acoustics, because when you're in a swimming pool, it's really echoey, and that's not necessarily a great listen for 4 hours. Yes, you've got music and you can put packages in between and stuff like that. So the first thing was speak to my engineer and see if there's a way. And essentially it's kind of like a boom mic, but it wasn't exactly like a boom mic. So what essentially happened was there's a bloke, my engineer, poolside with a very long rod and a microphone that's directly sort of pointing down towards me, so I could speak to him wherever I was in the pool, whether I was on the edge, whether I was in the middle, whether I was in the deep end. The easiest thing for us to do was for me to try and speak to him from the edge of the pool, so I could then put on a pair of headphones. So we had a radio mic pack connected to some cheap headphones, so we weren't too precious about, expensive DTs, for example, that are 300 odd quid getting ruined in the water. They were a cheap pair of headphones, and that was the only way I was able to hear output. What we also decided to do at one point was have a megaphone, and that would be the way that my producer would communicate with me, because as you'll know, when you're swimming and you don't have headphones on, you have no idea what's going on the output.
I know when I'm swimming, I've got no kind of concept of time, really.
No,
as well.
none at all whatsoever. None
You
at all whatsoever.
get into the laps, don't you? But you don't really. You'd have no idea a song was coming to an end. You
Oh
just
God,
wouldn't.
no. So
no
the only
idea at all.
way, what we thought was, well, let's have a megaphone, not like a megaphone poolside, so that, you know, they could buzz it and say 30 seconds or whatever. However, Georgie, the morning of the swim, the megaphone broke. The only way my producers could communicate with me was essentially by waving and saying 30 seconds, writing on a flip chart, old school. This is the song that's just finished. This is the next song you're going to. And by the way, I was doing interviews in the water. So I know that there were definitely presenters that would have done interviews poolside. Some of them might have been maybe in the water with the odd one here or there, but we got guests in the pool. I was interviewing my swimming teacher. I was interviewing other women in the pool. So yeah, it was quite a feat. But as you'll know, I was getting the information probably about 10 seconds before, and then you're straight into the interview. The big thing was just trying to recover so that I didn't sound completely out of breath. That was the hard part.
During the course of that 4-hour show, you did your 62 lengths for that day.
Yeah, what we did was I did a breakfast two-way at 9:30, and then they were sort of like, okay, dive in, Summaya. So if I needed to get a few lengths in the can before going on air, we had that buffer. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then I was on at 10. I finished my lengths at 12:30 because we only had the pool for a couple of hours. So I didn't have 4 hours to do the lengths. It was sort of like, by 12:30, you got to get out, love. I finished them. Yes, you're absolutely right. The 62 lengths were completed. And then we were out in the CAF taking the rest of the programme between 12:30 and 2:00. In the cafe of the leisure centre.
How did you get dry and dressed in the news or something? Or did you put Stairway to Heaven on? How did you do it?
It was exactly that. It was a case of, right, when have we got some really long songs? And what, but as you'll know, you could play a couple of songs back to back, but that's pretty much it. You can't be, X mixing, playing 7 songs back to back so I can go and do my hair and makeup. No, it was literally a case of I got out of the pool, whipped my swimming costume off, whacked some dry clothes on, put a hat on my head because my hair was wet, but there was no way I was going to be able to dry my hair. And it was straight into getting a hot chocolate in my system and doing interviews.
When your producer came up with this idea of let's do the show from inside the pool, and then all these logistics of the back end of the show is going to have to be done in the cafe. You're going to have to try and get dry and changed and out. Were you really up for this, or did you just go, you're mad? How are we going to do this?
Georgie, you're talking to me, love. Of course I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. Of course, I've just said that I said, yeah, and let's get an inflatable. You know what I mean? I was totally up for it. Absolutely. I've learned about myself over the last few years that I'm happiest when I'm attempting an absolutely mental challenge. So it's been a real sort of a learning experience about my personality type as well. I don't know what that says about me, but no, I was up for it. I didn't know if anyone had ever done it before, so we had no idea how to do it. We had no framework to go from. And, I've also got a really ambitious team. So I remember when speaking to the engineer, he was in my studio straight after the show. And I was like, Andrew, I've got something to tell you. And I could just tell from the look on his face, he was thinking, God, I don't know what she's going to say. I know she's going to say something absolutely nuts. So I was like, just hold on to your seat. This is what I'm thinking. And credit to him, he didn't say no. He went away, and within half an hour, he'd found a solution for us to be able to make it happen. So I couldn't do it without the team. It literally would have been impossible without the engineer and the producers and me just sort of throwing out the mental ideas, but all of us just being like, what's the worst that can happen? Let's just give it a crack.
You could have electrocuted yourself is the worst that could...
Yeah, but we were quite, Andy the engineer, just for the record, Andy the engineer made sure it was very, very safe in that sense. It was fine. It was totally fine.
And you had a special swimsuit made, didn't you? A special children in need swimsuit.
Yeah, so big shout out to De Montfort University, who have got an amazing fashion and contour department. They literally did it for free. They volunteered to make Pudsey-inspired swimming costumes for all 5 of us. And it was a case of going down to the department. They measured us. Mine was a bit like a jumpsuit, like a catsuit, because I had like a full leg, and then it was sleeveless, sort of high neck. I was a bit concerned about drag because of the fact that they were going to have to put quite a few layers of material because the swimsuit was white. And you know what? You don't want to go and see through like in your bum and your boobs, do you, Georgie? So they whacked the layers on.
This is it. White swimsuits asking for trouble, isn't it? But also as well, when you were doing the live show, I should imagine you gathered quite a crowd, didn't you? There must have been people watching this all going on.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. On all of the days, to be fair, especially the days that we were rocking the Pudsey suit, especially the Friday. The Friday was really special because that was the final day. All of us had Pudsey-inspired suits and we had bands poolside and there were kids when we got out of the water. So, yeah, it was brilliant. It's not every day you see someone poolside with I look like a Pudsey polka dot Power Ranger, but I was loving it.
I feel like I'm biting back tears a little bit to step out of the pool and just to see, a beautiful kind of eclectic mix of so many different children. They're all there with their Pudsey ears and it's just a reminder of that's what it's all about.
Like I said earlier, other BBC local radio stations did this challenge as well. And some other stations did do their shows from the pool. I know my former colleagues at BBC Radio Norfolk did on Friday, they did their breakfast show. But how important do you feel as a network, as a team, it is to do stuff like this for children in need? Because you all came together, didn't you, to do this challenge?
Yeah, totally. Well, I was speaking to a mate of mine, Kofi Smiles, who's the breakfast show presenter on Humberside, literally last night. And Kofi was like, mate, you know what? It's just brilliant for us on BBC Local Radio to have a real challenge for BBC Children in Need, because we cover it every single year. But I don't think, at least in my experience of the last 7 years I've been on BBC Local Radio, I've never done something that's so joined up, other than make a difference, which we do every single year, but nothing for us to work towards for charity as a network. And that was the only way it was possible. It was only possible because all of us were involved, And I know that different stations would have had the challenges and all of us found it difficult at times, whether that was producer challenges or even trying to get a team together, et cetera, et cetera. But it really felt like you were part of something that was much bigger than just you. And that really made a difference, I think, not only because it was for BBC Children in Need, but because you were doing it alongside others up and down the country and connecting with others as well through their stories of swimming. I hope at least others feel also like it brought us together within BBC Local Radio as well, when we don't always get the chance to have those opportunities. So yeah, it was a real privilege, to be honest, to be a part of. And the other thing I should say is it's not about just the swimmers. There were so many people behind the scenes at all of those radio stations that would have made it possible for the swimmers to complete those miles as well. We should definitely shout out and spotlight those individuals as well, because without them, it just wouldn't have happened.
A big thank you to Summaya, and also a big shout out to all the BBC nations and local radio stations who took part, swam that 1,000 miles and raised over £100,000 for children in need. Pudsey's big day is this Friday, the 15th of November. Congratulations to our Real World 30 Under 30 who were announced this week. You can find out who they are and a bit about them on our website, radioacademy.org 30 Under 30. And if you check out our news page, you'll see that we're recruiting for a membership and programmes coordinator freelance role. So go and check that out as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your pods, and leave us a review too. It all helps and we really appreciate it. Next week, we look into the BBC apprenticeship scheme. Who's it for and how can you apply? I'll see you next week.